Hey, welcome back, everybody. Of course, this is Dr. Keith McNally, and I'm here with Dr. Colleen Kelley, and this is the Question Guy podcast. And like I said in our first conversation, I wanted to bring her back because I have them. I have file one, and I have file two. And this is the MC Detective Agency. So, Dr. Kelley, you're going to talk to me all about what the MC Detective Agency is, and then hopefully we can kind of go into the characters and this character
Yeah.
is MC because it's about the MC Detective Agency, and that's MC. So I'm going to be showing the camera. I'm going to be showing the book to the camera a lot.
Okay.
Talk to me about the how you what was what were the thoughts about this because you are the chemistry expert and you said there has to be a way of helping younger people think about it without using a lab. That was what we talked about before. There's
Right.
no lab
Correct.
exercises here. This was really about helping young people understand chemistry and you take them on adventures. You take these characters
Yeah.
on adventures and the first one and I think the first two they it's time travel. And so they go back. Talk to me. How did you develop this idea of a comic book?
Well, the comic book came from writing a dialogue-rich story that was so intensely dialogue-rich that I realized a better format for that than a traditional like picture book would be a comic book when you have just constant need for characters to be explaining things or speaking with each other. Um, the characters came from an evolution of Poppy and Ray. I've had this fascination with Marie Curie for decades. And I did my postdoctoral research in France myself. So I'm a female trained French chemist myself, and in a little bit of a way. And I really started to learn about Marie Curie and who she was as a woman, who her daughters were, um, what her lifestyle was like. She was obviously a very gifted and talented scientist, but she was, a single mother who won two Nobel Prizes. Like, who does that? Like in 1910, you know, I mean, and women didn't have the right to vote. And here she is being a single mom, and when you read her biography written by her youngest daughter, you realize that she had all the guilt of a mother going off to the lab. Like she felt bad leaving her daughters behind. She's a working mom and she didn't like to leave her kids behind. So sometimes she brought them with them to the lab. And um, I just fell in love with Marie, the woman, and then their family and their trio. And it's a genuine love story that I have with that family and what they accomplished. So MC is a tribute to Marie Curie, and um, Poppy stands for polonium, and that's the first element that she discovered, and Ray stands for radium. So
And
while
those are these young
yeah, those are
people,
the two
right?
youngest.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Marie Curie's youngest daughter is named Eve, and that's where we get Granny Eve from. So the connection between Granny Eve and MC, the old radio, comes from being that mother-daughter kind of relationship. Even though in my comic book series I don't develop it, I develop it more as a friendship.
Mhm.
But certainly as we go on in life, as we become older and our parents become older, we do transfer from being parent-child to more, hopefully more of a friendship. And certainly Eve Curie and Marie had that dynamic towards the end of her life. Marie Curie, or MC, as a radio, as this kind of mysterious character, because I really wanted her to guide secretly Poppy and Ray on the missions through Granny Eve. And I felt like bringing a person into it would be a little bit too obvious. And I just like the mystery of having, is MC the radio? Is she someone speaking behind the radio? And what time are they in? And
Well,
so the
Granny
radio
Eve
just,
knows who MC is because,
Granny Eve knows who
yeah,
MC is. Yes.
even
Yeah.
at the onset, we get that idea that they're even talking, they're even talking to each other.
Yep. They talk to each other and they know who each other are and they know. And Granny Eve actually is a chemist herself, and the kids aren't really aware of that. I mean, they see some funny things happening in their kitchen, but they're still not really aware of her role as a chemist, and that, she's from the great Curie family. So
Mhm.
there's these just hints of things that allow Poppy and Ray to really take the lead. And that's to empower kids to join the MC Detective Agency. And then they're right on board with Poppy and Eve without any kind of presumed understanding ahead of time.
So, how big is the MC Detective Agency at this point?
Oh, it's just Poppy, Poppy and Ray.
You have your own group of students right now. I think either they have I think last semester they went through your pilot program.
Oh, right, right, right. Every student that reads this book, yeah, becomes part of the MC Detective Agency. Correct. Yes.
Cool.
So there is that call to the reader throughout the book to join in and help out and whatnot. So, we've got a couple hundred students at this point who are part of the agency. We're hoping that number is into the millions in
Well,
in a
even
few years.
hundreds is a great place to start.
Yeah.
And so all over where? All over the America, all over
There's
where?
been some international sales. Yeah. So,
Okay.
yep. So I take it when someone buys the book that they become part of the agency.
So did they like I didn't check on your website. Is there like an official sign up for, do they get a certificate or anything like that?
Not yet, but that's a great idea. I might implement that.
Well, I was just thinking because, we've got kids who t are taking ownership of, being a scientist, a chemist.
Right.
And
Yeah. No, that's a great idea. Badges are fantastic.
so there's a story around this. And then I know I'm just loving the book. So throughout in the middle of the book, there are exercises. And of course, one of your key exercises is the periodic table. And
Hmm.
in a PDF handout, I'm not sure I was kind of confused, and please forgive me. You make the periodic table a twister game, right? Like a game of
Yeah.
like you put
Yeah.
it on the
So there,
floor.
yep. Yeah. There's a big giant shower curtain that you can get from Amazon that
Okay.
you can put on the floor that's the size of a 5x8 carp rug. So it's a very big, sizable. And then you can play periodic table twister. And the reason for that is it's a fun game for one thing, but the more time you spend with your eyes on the periodic table, the more comfortable you're going to get with it as a really handy, I call it like the Swiss Army knife of science. Like it can do everything. It tells you stories, it tells you how much something weighs, it can give you how many electrons, it can tell you how reactive it's going to be, it can tell you whether it's a solid, liquid, or gas. It's just such a handy tool that the more familiar you are with it, I also like to talk about it like a keyboard. And my students, when they first take a chemistry exam, if they're not familiar with the periodic table, they peck, just like you would peck at a keyboard, right?
Hmm.
And think how long it takes for you to type a paper if you're doing this versus this, right?
Right.
And the same is true with the periodic table. If your eyes know to go left and up to find hydrogen quickly, then you can navigate solving puzzles and problems a lot faster if you can find the clues that you need. So the periodic table is this just rich array of clues and fun information and handy information. Um, but its organization and its the way it's organized is so elegant and beautiful, but the patterns need to be practiced. So you need to practice the patterns. And once you do, it becomes soup. You're like, what did I do without this by my side? But until you do, it's a foreign object. And I feel like a lot of my exercises may seem like busy work, but they're not at all. Like the twister is aimed at um basically, like I said, like a keyboard lesson to become fluent with the periodic table so that you can be fluid over. And then if I asked you to find carbon, you could, oh, carbon weighs 12. I know that.
And so here's the periodic table laid out for us. And they're in groups. And so group 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then the trend. And I forget, like I said in our first conversation,
Yeah.
college was a long time ago. And chemistry, I was good at it, but that was a long time ago too.
Go too.
So with that, talk to us about, you said this was elegant. You called this
Oh,
beautiful
it's
and
beautiful.
you
Yeah,
called it,
yeah.
well, you are the only person that I know to date, and I'm a half a century old, who has ever called this beautiful and elegant. So, and I appreciate that. So talk to me about what makes this, well, now that it's colored, but what is this, how is this beautiful and elegant? Tell me about that.
So
Tell me
the
why you describe it in
organization,
that way.
first of all, the organization of it, when it was discovered in the early 1800s, I bring my students back to that time in history and I ask them what was around the early 1800s. And I say, were there highways? No. Dirt roads. Cars? No. Horse and buggy. And so there was a chemist, a Russian chemist named Mendeleev, who literally had a dream and had some information about different elements from letters written all over the world. They would send them to him.
Wait,
And
wait,
so
wait, wait.
someone,
You said he had a dream?
yeah, he had a dream. So, but is the true story is that people would write him letters. So this is a real story.
Okay.
And then I'll get to the dream part. And they would write him letters about different substances that they discovered and about the properties and what they discovered and send him a letter. So say maybe they discovered something like silicon and they would write about that, not name it silicon, but I discovered this substance that has these properties and send him a letters. He had all these letters of all these pure substances, and then he had a dream about how they could be assembled.
Uh-huh.
And he assembled them in the order that you see on the periodic table, got them all correct. The magic comes from those numbers on the top, the 1, 2, 3, 4 to 117. That actually is the number of protons in an atom of that element. We weren't able to visualize an atom until 1989. So 200 years prior, Mendeleev put together this table in correct order, 1, 2, at the time, maybe 80 something, without knowing that he was putting them in order of the number of protons ascending. That is magic. I
Well, I
don't
don't know
know
what that
how.
is, but that is something. Yeah.
It's something really to be revered, right? There's some prophecy there where, and it turns out that that number of protons equals the number of electrons. It also turns out that it's in ascending order of their weight. The number at the bottom is how much they weigh. It gets richer than that. If you go to look at look, if you look in the middle where the transition metals are, you have copper, silver, and gold. Um, so copper's Cu, silver's Ag, and gold is Au. How much is a penny worth? 1 cent, right? That's copper, right at the top.
Mhm.
Okay. Dimes are made of silver, 10 cents. Gold's a little more valuable. All the periodic trends are that the properties are enhanced as you go down a what's called a family. Okay, so if we look at a family, if we look at group one, that we won't start really with hydrogen, but we'll start with lithium, sodium, potassium. As you go down that family, group one, they get more explosive.
Hmm.
As you look at zinc, cadmium, and mercury, zinc's kind of toxic. It helps cure our colds a little bit. Cadmium is pretty poisonous. It'll mess with your bones and give you some bone cancer. And mercury is deadly like that. So all the properties that he lined up, not only is it an ascending number of protons, electrons, mass, it's organized so elegantly to be able to predict. So if you in the old times, if you went to the hospital and had surgery, what did the surgeons use to clean? Do you know what element?
No, you stumped me.
Iodine. So I don't know if your parents ever put iodine on a cut, but they still
Okay.
actually, before surgery, spray the surgical area with iodine first because it cleans. It's a very
Okay.
disinfecting agent. And if you look to above iodine, there's chlorine. Well, we use chlorine for Clorox, right?
Right. Right.
Right. So, and bromine is also used to disinfect. So all their disinfecting agents are in group 7. So there's really some great trends that are so rich and robust, and that have withstood. We don't have anything else, any other scientific document that is still correct from 250 years ago.
So, in order to help young people really, like you said, instead of hunting and pecking, really become familiar with it, you create a series of activities. One of them is
Yep.
here. And you have a consistent activity called Poppy's Puzzles.
Yep.
It's consistent throughout, the books. And here's another one,
Yep.
Poppy. So what are Poppy's Puzzles? And here's
They're
one.
just different ways of having students and readers look at the periodic table in a different venue, just to, again, it's just to get eyes on the periodic table and to help with the hunting and the pecking.
Okay.
So there's everybody loves a decoder letter. So who doesn't love to use the periodic table as a way to decode something? So there's clues underneath each line, and then you fill in the letter of the symbol of the element above it, and all of a sudden there'll be a letter that appears on that. So they're really just games that are intended to be fun. Much like a crossword puzzle helps with vocabulary, right?
Hmm.
These Poppy's puzzles have that same kind of goal.
I have to ask because I don't know the answer. The characters are green.
Yeah.
The characters are green, and that has to be specific for a reason, please. And I've been, and again, I don't know. So please
No,
answer.
that's the number one question I get from everybody is why are they green?
What?
So polonium and radium are radioactive substances, and when Marie Curie first discovered them, she carried around these little green vials of polonium and radium with her everywhere she went. And so they're that glowing green, like glow stick green, if you
Okay.
will.
Okay.
And that's the color of the element. So they represent, so the characters in the story are to represent the elements, or the molecules that they stand for. So if polonium is Poppy, she's green. Ray is radium, he's also green. And that's why they're twins, because they're both radioactive substances.
Okay. Well, I'm now better with that. That is so. So you also bring in specific characters, like characters when they go back in time,
Mhm.
right? And so who do they bring in file number 1, Case of the Deadly Dials? Do you remember?
So this was an interesting research project for me. The Deadly Dials has to do with the Radium Girls.
Mm-hmm.
And the Radium Girls were around in the 1920s, painting watch dials with radium paint, which turned out to be cause cancer.
Right.
So when I did the research on that, I looked, and the main factory was in Orange, New Jersey in the 1920s. And I thought, that sounds familiar. And I poked around a little bit. I'm like, Thomas Edison's lab was 4 blocks away, also in Orange, New Jersey in the 1920s.
For
And
real?
I did a little more research. Yeah, and nothing has been verified this. So I took some historical liberties here, historical fiction. I thought, how is it possible that his lab was next to the US radium factory and then his assistant actually died of radium poisoning because he dabbled with it? He thought he might use radium in his light bulbs because, right, because it glows in the dark,
Mhm.
right? So if he's trying to create something that illuminates, he had his assistant dabble with radium. His assistant died from it. He became scared to death of it, would never touch the stuff. And yet his lab was blocks away from where this was happening. And so the fact that when Poppy and Ray go back in time and stumble into Thomas Edison is plausible for sure.
Mhm.
Orange, New Jersey is not a big town. There's two hubs of science going, or one hub of science and one use of radium going on in there. So the intersection is very plausible, although that's never been written about before. So I just took that liberty and thought, who would they run into that could help them understand the periodic table or get started? I thought, well, Thomas
And
Edison was there. Let's bring him into the story.
that's perfect. And for file two, the case of the missing atomic model,
Hmm.
who do we who's here? It's got crazy hair.
Yeah, that's Einstein.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they run in, they go back in time, and that's also a true story. They go back to a conference in 1927, Brussels, Belgium, called the Solvay Conference, where the very first modern model of the atom was discussed. And so all the characters that they run into were at that conference, including Marie Curie and Einstein.
These are the only two that I have access to. I don't know if you've printed any more. These are the only two that were sent to me.
Three,
So,
yes, 3 and 4 are coming out in the next I would say by February 1st.
okay.
Episode 3 is a pirate episode, so they go, it's a little bit more fun. They go back to 1707 Caribbean to go after a pirate treasure, but it has a Princess Bride theme. So there are a lot of jokes from the book or movie, The Princess Bride, in there. They're looking for the six electron man instead of the six finger man. So there's a little more levity from that. It's less historical fiction, but based on a parody of The Princess Bride. And then the fourth one, they stay in modern day times and they go to a rock concert. And at the rock concert, the title of it is called Save the Vanishing Van Gogh. It's a benefit concert. And it turns out that Starry Night, the colors are fading from the painting. And so the concert is to benefit the sadly fading Starry
Oh,
Night.
oh my.
And so they go back in time, or they go to the rock concert to save Starry Night from vanishing.
So I have to ask, are you the brainchild behind the story of these comic books?
Yes,
Then I applaud you.
100%.
I applaud you because that's
I
fantastic. And
don't know. People should be afraid then.
no, I
It's a
I
little
think
bit nuts up here.
the way well I tell stories all the time, and but my stories are more fantasy based for building ideas around leadership. And anyway, I think these are beautiful. The books themselves are beautiful, and these stories behind them are fantastic. And so, as you build this, I just applaud you. You're
Thank
doing
you.
such a wonderful job, and hopefully, you will. All the students who are part of the MC Detective Agency will get themselves their certificate. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, I
They
love
could
that
down
idea.
they could
That's
download it from your
genius.
website. Dr. Colleen Kelley, one last thing in 30 seconds or less. What's the value of these books? What are the value of these books, Dr. Kelley?
What do you mean the value?
Tell me why somebody would want to order them and buy them and have them in their
Oh,
classroom.
these books make chemistry accessible to anyone that picks them up. And
Okay,
it's a subject that until these books came out is inaccessible to most people. So I've created an onboarding route for the world to enter the world of chemistry.
that is true. Perfect. This has been another edition of the Question Guy podcast. We'll see you next time. Take care.